Well, hello everybody. Sorry for that small technical faff. So welcome to the latest Inspirability talk, and I'm both your host and your moderator today because today we're talking with a very special person, and of course none of us at Aerobility would be enjoying the wonderful journey we do at this charity without this pioneer of aviation, quite frankly, and the inspiration behind this charity, Mike MillerSmith, MBE, of course, I'm talking about. So these Inspirability talks are designed to keep this charity afloat. We've really suffered during these hard times of COVID ever since the end of March. And so we're taking the charity into the virtual world. Some of you will have seen the Armchair Air Show, which was a wonderful success. There's more to come with that. And we've been trying to keep the Aerobility members engaged through their laptops, their phones, devices, smart TVs, through these Inspirability talks. So hopefully you've been enjoying these talks. And as I said, they're designed to raise money. So you will see on the bottom of the screen throughout this talk today how you can donate and support this wonderful charity. Do please send in your questions. We're going to have a live chat. You can enter that chat room very easily on your screens. And so this is it. This is the Inspirability talk you've probably all been waiting for, which of course is Mike MillerSmith. So Chad will bring Mike on in just a moment. My friendship with Mike began in 2006 when I was looking for a way to raise money for an aviation charity, and literally bumped into Mike MillerSmith following a cold call to the charity, the British Disabled Flying Association, as it was called then, and so that friendship began. So I'm going to give you just a very quick background to Mike. Mr. Modest, as he's known amongst his friends and colleagues at Aerobility, and he really does, as I say, epitomise what these Inspirability talks are all about. It's inspiration and it's aviation, and Mike just delivers that in spades. He's a man and boy aviator, 2,000 plus flying hours, represented the UK internationally in gliding competitions. In fact, was representing the best of British in aviation in his teens. So really interested to hear about that. Mike started to learn to fly commercially, and that's when his disability took hold and made him have to change his direction in life, and ended up going into the pharmaceutical industry, and specifically IT. And so had a very interesting time there. We'll hear about that. But the aviation was calling, so he found his home at Aerobility back in the very early 2000s. And so and here we are today, you know, this wonderful visionary person that leads us together with Shona to turn dreams and ideas into reality for so many thousands of people around this country and indeed around the world. There's so many people who've come to Aerobility who've heard about the wonderful work that this charity does. Now, it's not just us that think he's done wonderful things. It's also others. I've got a list here of awards and recognitions about Mike. In 2013, Mike was awarded the MBE by the Queen for charitable services to disabled flying. In 2010, the Air League recognised Mike with the illuminated scroll, again for services to disabled flying. But by his own admission, and I really look forward to hearing about this from Mike a bit later, Mike received the Barnes-Wallis Medal from the Honourable Company of Air Pilots. That was in 2011, for the development of technology and techniques for disabled aviation. So, to have been in that room, I'm sure was a very special moment for Mike. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Mike onto the screen. So Chad, if you're able to bring Mike, there he is. There's the man himself. How are you?
Thanks, John. Very pleased to be here.
And I'm sorry I embarrassed you. You really are Mr. Modest, and I'm sure you were just cringing behind the screen there. But how's lockdown been then? It's been an interesting journey, hasn't it, for the team at Aerobility for the last few months?
Yeah, not without its challenges, but as you know, I think disabled people in particular are used to challenges. So I think as a team, we've really pulled together and tried to find new ways to do things and to engage online a bit like we are today. So we've had the Inspirability talks, we've had the Spirit of Aviation competition, and of course the Armchair Air Show, which has been a great way to continue to use flying as a glue to hold the community together. People get so much pleasure from flight. Perhaps we'll talk about a bit of that today. And actually to do that virtually has been a godsend literally for the last few months.
No, absolutely. And I think that that word innovation really, I think, has summed up this charity, certainly, in the last decade. I think I say we, of course, I'm involved with the charity as well. But I think, the charity has, I think, turned so many heads, and it's pioneered so many new things in aviation that we're not scared to innovate. And of course, that innovation comes from you, Mike. Lots of crazy ideas that normally start at the bar have turned into reality. And of course, the Armchair Air Show was one. There's the Build a Plane. There's a number of world records this charity has broken. But it's not just about the charity, Mike, we're here today to talk about. It's you and it's your journey in aviation and where you started. And I would like to, if I can, just jump back to this Barnes-Wallis medal, because you and I had a conversation this morning about why that medal was so important to you and about your grandfather. So give us the story, Mike. How did aviation get into your blood? Perhaps in relation to that story with your grandfather.
Well, I think, like many people that enjoy aviation, I think it starts with your parents that sort of take you to air shows or encourage you to do things. I was really lucky that my parents were very encouraging and sort of enriched my childhood to try things and go to air shows and getting involved and doing things I like doing, like flying. I was encouraged to do. The aviator before me in the family was my grandfather, who was a squadron leader during the war and flew the Wellington and the Mosquito. So the Wellington, of course, was the brainchild of Barnes-Wallis, so a very famous engineer, an innovative engineer that developed the geodetic structure that the Wellington aircraft was built from. So for my grandfather to fly an airplane designed by Barnes-Wallis and to receive the Barnes-Wallis medal also for innovating with disabled aviation was a lovely connection. So I was really thrilled to receive that medal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure you had your grandfather in your thoughts that day. And just a real memorable time there for you. And so the journey began. So I remember my first air show. It was Biggin Hill, and it was 1980. How about yours?
Yeah, I think it was Greenham Common, about late 70s, I suspect. Yeah, maybe a bit earlier, 75, 76, something like that.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's the place, isn't it, where the that flame's ignited, because you can smell it, can't you? You can see the aviation all around you, and I think as a boy you just can't fail to be inspired by that kind of activity right in front of you. And of course, IAT as it was then was probably the hope. It's the place you should be. And of course you were very local to that. You're Hampshire born and bred, I believe, and then that took you to somewhere to do with gliding, of course, which was Lasham. So tell us about that journey, because you entered aviation through gliding. So what was the story there?
Well, I entered aviation through model flying to start with. So I grew up next to a school football field. So there was model flying there when I was 11, 12 years old. So I got involved in RC models. I was lucky that the school I went to had a combined cadet force. So I got involved with the CCF, the RAF cadets at school, and did some flying and a glider and a venture motor glider and a chipmunk. And that was really, really sort of a great way to get exposed to aviation. I really fully believe in young people getting involved in aviation. And so I saw there was a cadetship at Lasham Gliding Club, where if you were, I think, over 14, you could fly very, very cheaply, and it was something you applied for. I remember writing an essay to apply for it, and you could have a winch launch for something like £1.50, and the soaring charges were free. So you can literally learn to fly for £100, which was brilliant. Yeah. So went solo just after my 16th birthday, and did a lot of gliding very young, and that was a really great way to to develop those stick and rudder skills and get into flying.
Yeah, and so so that's the genesis of your aviation journey, really. And did you, like many of us, just hang out at the airfield at the weekends? I always remember a question was asked of a famous display, I think it was Paul Bonham actually, and someone asked him, so how did you end up in the seat of a Spitfire and a Sea Fury flying around at the weekends? And he said, well, I just went up to my local airfield and I just stayed there and made myself busy, and then it started from there. Is that a similar story? I mean, did you just have a in the world and hang around the airfields?
I just think any excuse to be at the airfield, to be around airplanes, to be around people that also like being around airplanes. I'm sure my school results suffered. My university results definitely suffered by being too much time at the airfield. But I think, that's what makes us rounded individuals, doing those things that we love doing. It's really important. Yeah,
no, it is, doesn't it? It feeds the soul. And so how did your sort of gliding time at Lasham develop? Because, that's really been a big part of your life, isn't it? And can you remember those early days and, the first gliders that you flew? And, I know you've owned gliders in the past. Give us that perspective on how that journey started and then ultimately where it ended up.
I think as an environment, gliding is very good at just encouraging people to fly for the sake of flying. If you've got the goal to fly, then there's always somebody that will help you to do that. It's a very nurturing environment if you show the interest and the passion. There's lots of different types of gliders to fly. There's lots of things to do in gliding, whether it's teaching other people to fly or learning to fly aerobatics, or what most people do, which is going cross-country flying. But actually the challenges of flying the airplane as efficiently as you can, using the weather to your advantage. On a good summer's day in the UK, you can fly for hundreds of miles, effectively using solar power and using your skill and ingenuity, reading the sky and flying the airplane optimally is a really fantastic challenge. But I think some of the best aviators in the world have always said that gliding has been one of the best ways of honing their skills. It really is a good way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you owned a glider at Lasham, did you not? And how did all that begin?
So I've owned a share in a Nimbus 3, which I've shared with some friends, and some friends have still got a share of that glider, which is a great two-seater. It's an aerial armchair, really high performance, so you can fly around and cover a lot of distance, which is great. But I was lucky to fly all sorts of airplanes, teaching other people, and from a small primary, which is a very basic flying broomstick, through to the latest open class gliders that can, fly 1,000 kilometers or more. Yeah,
and the primary, this was literally wooden fabric glider, in the open air, and the Air Training Corps flew those in the 50s, did they not? I mean, that's
they were issued to lots of air cadet units and to CCF units, and they were used on school playing fields. So they were designed for people to do slides along the ground and short hops using bungees, where you were literally dragged into the air. So there's still a few knocking around that were used in that sense.
I can't imagine the health and safety police will be happy with that nowadays. But it's all these things in aviation have to start somewhere, don't they? And it's great to see that there's some of those still flying around. Now, the Nimbus 3, tell us about that glider. That was a really high performance piece of kit, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've got a picture somewhere. I don't know if Chad behind the scenes has got a picture, but it's a 26.5 meter wingspan, approaching that of an early 737. So it's got a big wingspan and a glide ratio of over 60-1. So if you're 1,000 foot up, you can, do 60,000 feet forward. So a mile high, you can cover 60 miles. So it's a really very efficient gliding machine and still pretty competitive even now.
And tell us about the competitions. I mean, did you use that glider for any of the competitions you entered? And, what was give us some stories from those days.
So I was lucky enough to be on the junior gliding team when I was much younger. So I was flying in the under 25 class effectively. So I went out to Sweden and flew a competition there, which was great fun to meet other glider pilots from around the world. I did okay in that, and I ended up on the British team for a while. So so it's really good camaraderie and just the challenges of flying overseas, of course, is a challenge. But it was also quite scary flying with lots of other gliders in very close proximity, in a competitive environment. But yeah, brilliant to do when you're young.
And this was the period in your life you met Shona, is that right? Who's now our chairman of Aerobility.
Yeah, Shona and I have been friends since we were teenagers. So yeah, Shona was also a product of the gliding movement as flying gliders and then flying glider tugs and sort of moving into a career that way. So yeah, it's we've got there's a picture of a primary. There we go.
There it is. My goodness me.
So yeah, flying broomstick, that was called.
Yeah, you've got to be young and fearless to get in that, haven't you?
Yeah, that was certainly a bit of wind in the hair.
Yeah. So aviation was in your blood. So that was the time that you thought this was your career path, and then you began your flying training to move into the commercial flying. So tell us about that period in your life, and of course your disability.
So, like many young people at that point, the world allowed you to do what's called the self-improvement route to get your commercial license. So where you hours build, do your exams, do your flight tests, and get your commercial license that way. So I was on that route. So I did all my hours building. So I was a glider tug pilot. So I flew over 1,000 hours flying glider tugs. Did up my hours at Lasham, and I went up to Scotland for a year and flew up there and built experience and hours that way. And then did my twin rating and my there's first solo at Cardiff. And but started to notice muscle weakness in my arms and shoulders. So the investigation showed, unfortunately, that I've got a genetic condition called muscular dystrophy, which makes my major muscle groups become weaker over time. So commercial aviation was no longer a pathway forward, but I worked hard to carry on flying as best I could, both gliding and power flying, but also along that journey, realised that it'd be great to try and help other people do the same, to carry on flying or introduce them to flying, to do what they can to get airborne. So I went into industry for a little while. Somebody I met again through gliding helped me get a job in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's how I accidentally ended up in clinical research, working on drug trials and things like that. So again, the flying movement comes to your rescue when you need it.
Yeah, of course. Well, and I think that's about the time I met you, which was sort of early 2000s, and you entered the world of of charitable aviation, which there we go, the Pawnee. So how many hours on that one then, Mike?
That's up in Scotland, so that's near Boyne. So I certainly got a few hundred hours in the Pawnee. I think it's one of my favourite airplanes. An airplane it's nice and roomy inside, good for a big guy like me. Quite sort of airplane that feels like it's going to look after you. A flying tractor, it's all thick tubes and good strong structure. And I think because you fly them all day, every day, you get to know them so well. You can really land it on a sixpence, get the speed right back. We ended up going into fields you've never been into before, as in farmers' fields, to tow gliders out, doing so-called field retrieves. And you get so comfortable flying them, you can literally put them anywhere and fly them very accurately. So, I've always felt very comfortable in the Pawnee.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a strong airplane. So obviously, in the background you're still flying, but you've taken the career path in pharmaceuticals. Now, tell us about that piece of innovation that you were involved with, the electronic patient diary, because we all know, Mike, you've got a very fertile mind, and that's shown itself to be very true at Aerobility. But in your career in the pharmaceutical industry, tell us a little bit about what you were doing there, because it was a fascinating piece of ingenuity that went on at that company.
Yeah, initially I was involved with running clinical trials, but I've always been a bit of a geek, an IT geek, so I guess it was only natural I gravitated towards the technical side of clinical research. So I was involved in the early trials with electronic patient diaries. So when somebody's taking a new trial drug, obviously you need to ask them on a daily basis whether they're having any side effects or whether they feel any better or any worse. So that was always done using paper diaries, which were notoriously unreliable. People would forget to fill them in. The data would be sort of suddenly filled in at the last minute. People would leave questions blank. So electronically, of course, you can remind people to answer questions. You can analyze the data real time. So the early days of Palm Pilots and mobile phones and texting did give a real boost to collecting that clinical data in real time from people when they're taking a new drug in their homes. So, yeah, it was quite good fun to be involved in that, getting that going and develop marketing and technology that ultimately is very widespread in its use now.
Yeah. Well, you've just said the magical words there, marketing and technology. And of course, if you combine that with your skills of aviation and I think vision in terms of aerobility, tell us about how that all came together for you. And of course, our wonderful charity was under a different name back in those days. But tell us how you were introduced to this organisation.
I guess there's two key components really. One was I saw an advert or an article in, I think it was Flyer or Pilot magazine back in 2004 or 2003 even, that there was this organisation called the British Disabled Flying Club that had received some ex-Jordanian Royal Air Force Bulldog aircraft. They'd been donated and they were looking for help and support to get these aircraft operational. So I emailed or rang or went to a committee meeting, and before I knew it, I was, part of the team almost, and helping to get this first Bulldog flying. So there was a real inspiring character there called Roger Dixon, who was then in his late 70s or early 80s, one arm, but still flying aerobatics in his Cap 10, still with an active instrument rating and still a real force of nature. So he was the project manager, or the guy that was leading the Bulldog project, and he, there's good old Roger, and he was a real, didn't take no for an answer. Just when he saw something, he went for it, always coming up with new ideas to do things, a real innovator, and to be in his shadow and learn so much from him early on. I think I can credit lots of what Aerobility does now is because of Roger and his great ideas and just finding new ways of doing things. I think with disability, it's not about sort of surmounting problems, it's about going around the edge of them, finding new ways to solve issues. So, and also helping other people understand why we do it, why flying is so important and why it does change lives, putting smiles on faces. If we can help other people understand that, telling that story, people want to help and be part of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
so the Bulldog project was very much like that. That's what hooked me in. And I again, through the Gladiator Movement at Lasham, knew some volunteers that could help us get that first aeroplane renovated. And it was in a pretty sorry state when we started work on it and turned it into our first aeroplane. What was then the British Disabled Flying Association Bulldog. I think we've got a picture of the airplane when we started the process.
Well, as Chad Dixon, oh, there we go. So that's before restoration, clearly.
Yeah, so that's literally when we started to pull it apart just to see what state it was in. I think there was over 2 or 3 kilos of sand from the Jordanian desert in the bottom of the fuselage. So it literally been sat out for so long it was full of sand.
My goodness me. I've just had a note here from Ian Seeger, who, of course, was formerly a trustee of Aerobility, the British Disabled Flying Association, as it was then. And he says the advert was definitely Flyer magazine. So Ian is the publisher of Seeger, or the owner of Seeger Publishing, who publish Flyer Mag. So there we go. There's Ian. So you've been hook, line and sinker into the BDFA. When's this then? This was the early 2000s, was it not?
This was 2003, 2004, and the Bulldog was launched, the first flew in 2005. So there it is over Lasham. So the then maintenance company at Lasham, called ATC Lasham, donated their help and support. It became an apprentice project. So their engineers helped us rebuild the airplane. Their chief engineer, Steve Garish, was a great supporter, a real somebody that also enjoyed getting people involved in aviation, had built his own airplane and also wanted to get involved. So another great supporter that made it happen.
Mm-hmm.
You need everyone that supports the charity, or the companies that support the charity, it's often for personal reasons, for that shared passion. So there was a good case in point.
Now, here's a question that I know is asked quite often. For many years, the genesis of BDFA was very much a representative body for disabled flyers in this country who, would be able to ask the questions of the regulators, talk to the authorities and essentially be the voice for disabled aviation. But that's about as far as it went. And I know it was very much a club type atmosphere, bring your own airplane, come together occasionally. But tell us a bit about how that transformation occurred. I mean, clearly that Bulldog was very much a part of it. But how did this organization move from a club of like-minded individuals to turning into a charitable organization delivering a service for the disabled community, which is flying?
I'm sometimes credited with being the founder of the charity, and I'm not. I've really sort of joined halfway through the story, if you like. Before my time, it was very much a great gathering of disabled people with an interest in flying, but with no facilities as such. So using other flying clubs, volunteers to run occasional flying days around the country, but also to be a representative body to help lobby with the medical community and the CIA in particular to make sure that disabled people can fly and have access to the same opportunities just like anybody else. So that had pretty much of that had been done by the time I became involved. With great people like Tim Allison and people like that had become disabled and wanted to carry on flying. I've done a lot of work to help develop with the adaptions and with the medical side. So that was and made it possible for disabled people to fly. But I think what was lacking was infrastructure. So what the Bulldog gave us was the chance to run an experiment almost, in that could a group of disabled people operate an airplane for the benefit of themselves, but also other disabled people, to introduce disabled people to flight. So that experiment is kind of still going on. So first airplane, that Bulldog, we quickly realised that the transformative effect of flying and the benefit not just to the individual, but also those around them, their families, their friends, seeing the smiles on faces and sharing that together, quickly showed us that actually we were onto something. And I think there's a picture which shows one of the early trial flights we did with the Bulldog. We took it to Old Sarum. This chap here in the chair was newly disabled, had become a quadriplegic, and was in a pretty low spot. But the smile on his face when he flew the Bulldog really told the story. But we heard from his family that actually seeing that smile on the face was beneficial for them as well. Seeing that enjoyment and sharing that experience together made us realise that it's about the wider family unit as well. And from that point forward, I was really motivated to continue to introduce flying to as many people as we could, and to use it as a tool for disabled people to find out what they can do, not what they can't.
Yeah. Now we'll come on to what Aerobility is now and what we're doing currently, but let's stay back in the sort of 2004-2005 period. Now, there's a saying in aviation: if you want to make £1 million in aviation, start with 2. We're a charity, so you discovered you were onto something. How did that begin to snowball? What did you see that needed to occur to, change the face of the organisation as it was then, to be able to then turn into this, organisation that had structure, that had a means of income, and that could actually reach out to, a large industry? I mean, the aerospace industry in this country is massive. I mean, clearly that was something that at that point, I assume, was relatively untapped.
Yeah, I think it was about just building enough momentum that we could operate the airplanes, we could safely do so. We could show the regulator that we were doing it in a sensible way. We could show the people that we're flying with and their friends and family and their support network that they could fly safely and legally with the charity. We needed to raise enough money to operate the aircraft and also create an environment where you could teach and train effectively. So a building effectively, somewhere to put your hat, somewhere to unfold your map and draw the lines on it. All those are key components of safe flight. So we needed all those bits that a normal flying club would need, but also the supporting environment and the group of volunteers necessary to deliver that, not just in one location, but in hopefully more than one location. And again, building up in an incremental approach, just like all flying activities. You don't jump into an extra 300 or a Spitfire. You work your way up it, and I think the charity has done the same really over the last 27, 28 years old now, like the charity is slowly and carefully moved forwards. It's not been easy at times. We've really struggled. We've had issues along the way, but what I'm really proud to say is, at touch wood, we've always tried to do it as safely as possible and as ethically as possible. And every pound that we raise, just try and make sure that it's used as effectively as possible to put the biggest smile on the face and to change as much of a life as possible.
Yeah, no, very well said. And I think it's also very interesting, isn't it, to sometimes reflect on the fact that yes, Aerobility is a flying club at the end of the day, but it's a very, very unique club in that it's serving a particular part of our community, and it's delivering that in a very specific way. And how do you think, if we just look at that flying club perspective just for one moment, would you agree that over the last few years, since we've been operating this fleet of aircraft, that we've actually probably developed techniques and procedures in terms of flying instruction, ground briefings, that are utterly unique and that have been pioneered by this organization because of the people that are being trained?
Yeah, I think there's a real duty of care. We've got to do it as safely as possible, but also pushing the boundaries. So, great credit here to Mike Owen, who's our chief flying instructor and our most experienced instructor over the years, that he's very carefully and safely given people the confidence to go solo or even get their pilot's license. Look at some of the chaps that we got flying, guys and girls with disabilities that I think 20 years ago wouldn't have been able to go solo, the instructing environment wouldn't have felt comfortable allowing them to do so. But we've proven with that moderated and careful approach that it's perfectly safe for somebody with cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy to go solo and hold a pilot's license. And I think there's a level of trust that, for example, now when we do a medical flight test and we show the regulator, the CIA, that somebody can safely operate the airplane, then there's a genuine weight to that argument.
So obviously this organization is providing opportunities and services to the disabled individuals themselves, but tell us a bit about the work you've done, the top down, so EASA, the CAA and others, to almost, I suppose, educate really and open their minds into the fact that how do you start the conversation? It's not about what you can't do, it's actually what you can do. Give us some insights into those experiences.
I think part of it is tackling perception. I know that we got involved with the writing of the EASA regulations, Part Med for the FCL flight training regulations, and I know Shona did a great job when she went over to Germany to represent disabled flyers in the UK, to represent BDFA as was. And there was kind of the meeting started by saying, okay, disabled people just want to fly microlights and gliders, yes? And we quickly said that, no, actually, we believe the regulations should not just work for an ultralight, microlight or a glider, but also for a commercial airplane. If somebody is able to show that they can safely operate the airplane and meet the same standards as anybody else, whatever the license type, then they should be able to hold that license. So it was written into the regulations that after a medical flight test, and for example, if a suitable certified adaptation was fitted to that aircraft, whether it's a glider or whether it's a Boeing 747, then it's technically possible that a disabled person can operate that airplane and hold a license to fly that airplane. So I think that was a good sort of sea change in the thinking in EASA, certainly, that actually the regulation should go right across all license types. But if somebody's safe to fly, they're safe to fly.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit about the equipment at Aerobility, because obviously that had to be introduced and got developed over time, as we talked about. Techniques and procedures were developed that were probably entirely unique for this organization. So tell us a bit about the hoists, the modifications, the hand controls. What's different about the Aerobility fleet?
I think hoisting has had to become a part of my life because of my disability, and quite early on, and I realized that I wouldn't be able to get in an airplane without some help. So I was very personally motivated to explore how hoisting could be used to safely put somebody in an airplane. So it started off with how I could get into my glider. So I worked out just using a standard mobility hoist that I would be able to lift in and out of my glider, and that worked pretty well. I think there's a picture somewhere of me trying out a standard mobility hoist. There we go. So that was quite a simple way of safely getting out of a glider. Now, the trouble with many powered airplanes is they are much higher off the ground, and the wheels and the undercarriage and the wing tends to get in the way. So we had to do some experiments to find out what would be possible. So the Bulldog was actually quite good for doing some of those early trials. So it's got a big sliding canopy. So all you're going to do is get above the airplane. So hoist up and then move the airplane back underneath and then go back down again into the airplane seat. So it did some trials using attaching to the hangar roof. That was quite easy to do. And also did some trials using, I think it was a hay baler we borrowed from a farm to attach the hoist to the hydraulic arm such that you could lift up and down into the airplane. So that all went very well. So it showed that it was possible. Yeah, here we are actually on a day trip to France, using the Aero Club hangar here in France, lifting up out the airplane, move the airplane out the way, back down again into the wheelchair. So I was quite brave in those days trying these things out.
Yeah, no, I can. Crash test dummy springs to mind. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, but yeah, just to talk, a key hoist in our current kit we call Robo Hoist. It is a hoist which is still used actively at Blackbush even now, and that really just started by going to a disability exhibition about 15 years ago. I saw the hoist and thought that would be perfect in the airfield environment. So we spoke to the manufacturer, and there's me trying the hay baler based solution. It proved it worked well. But go back to this other hoist, we saw it at a disability exhibition at NADEX, spoke to the manufacturer, and they modified it for us to safely work, to go high enough and to reach far enough to get into most airplanes. So you just got to, it's about innovating. Just when you see something, you think that might work in our environment, let's give it a go.
Yeah. And how about in the cockpit? So
in the cockpit, we have been involved in certifying a few controls over the years, one of which is still in use now in our aircraft on a daily basis. That's the Turner hand control, which we certified for the PA28 series. So it's a hand control which allows anybody with a lower limb disability to operate the rudder using their hand. So up and down movement with that lever effectively operates the rudder pedals. So that's a very simple mod that we've got approved on the PA28 series, but we've been involved in other mods over the years with extra handholds, electric throttles. What else? We've had attachments for prosthetic limbs. So yeah, we've come across a few things over the years. I think one of the challenges with disability is that every disability is different. No body type is the same. So it's about finding adaptations which work for most people. But some disabilities do require a bit more adaptation. So that tends to happen to airplanes that people actually own and can actually adapt a bit more fully, if you like.
Now, of course, any organisation or any charity does need a figurehead. And Mike, I think when anyone thinks of Aerobility, they think of you, and you know, your vision that's brought this charity to where it is to date. But of course, with a vision requires the ability to actually share that vision and to bring in the support required in terms of finances or partnerships. And when did you realize, or tell us about those early days where you went to industry and you started trying to establish this organization on a firm footing financially? I mean, obviously, I know Brightening is one that's been around for a long time, but give us that journey.
Yeah, there was more misses than there was hits. I think in the early days, we were trying to feel for the right messaging, because in the early days, some of the responses we had were, well, why would you put a disabled person in an airplane? How's that going to help anybody? And actually, until you can eloquently show the impact that has on somebody's life, to show them that they can do something amazing like fly an airplane, do something that not many other people have had the chance to do, to actually focus on ability, not disability. Inherently something positive, seeing the world from another perspective. The cliches are definitely true. So until we could effectively tell that story, it was really tough. But yeah, credit to Breitling UK. They very early on, I think they were one of our first, if not the first, commercial supporters. So donated hats, they donated a watch for our first charity auction, a flight with the Breitling Jet team. That was back in 2006, I think. So very early on, they understood why we were doing it, and ultimately supported us financially and with the odd watch or two, which I credit really to helping us onto the pathway we're on now, which is hopefully a bit more refined but eloquent story that the aerospace community understands. And using the magic of flight is something that hopefully the community, both personal and corporate, understands and supports. But I think you need a latent interest in flight and interest in aviation, whether you're a corporate company or a personal individual, to support what we do. I think that will always be the case.
And tell us about that. I know there's been very many defining moments in this charity's history, but I do recall you sharing with me one day when you went to the Farnborough Air Show, did you not? And you gave a presentation, or you talked about Aerobility and or essentially trying to garner some support financially and corporately. I think that was the Farnborough Air Show, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we took the Bulldog to, let's think, it would have been, so 2008 was our first, it was every 2 years, isn't it, Farnborough? So, yeah, 2006, I think, would have been our first Farnborough show. And, it was, I think, again, it's much easier to demonstrate the value of what you do if you can physically show them. So actually having an airplane that people can sit in, seeing the smiles on faces, even with kids out in the crowd, we've always worked hard to open the door of the airplane. So often these days, aviation is behind closed doors. It's behind a security barrier. It's kind of untouchable. So wherever it's safe to do so, there's we make a gap in the fence. We open the door of the airplane and we encourage people to get in and make those brum brum noises and all those things that young people like to do. Yeah. But even for adults these days, they've never sat in the cockpit of an airplane. When I was a kid, when you went on holiday, you could ask the pilot to visit the flight deck. Those days are long gone. So people aren't quite exposed to it so much anymore. So I think we've got a role to play, not just in disabled interest, but helping everybody get interested in flight.
So we've got to the point now where this charity, with your leadership, has really moved forward significantly. And you talk about putting the charity on the map. And of course, there's nothing better. There's no better way of doing that than actually having some unique fundraising events and occasions. So share with us some of those memorable events where we've actually combined what is a unique project combined with actually raising funds for the charity.
Yeah, I think our first sort of crazy fundraiser was the aircraft pull we did back in 2008. So with the help again of Lasham and DHL and ATC at Lasham, we set a Guinness World Record pulling a Boeing 757 with about 38, I think, wheelchairs. So I think it was about 55, 60 tons. So that was our first sort of crazy idea. And we were really quite surprised how interested the global press was. It was covered all around the world. And I think we realized actually doing crazy things like this now and again is a good way to raise your profile and raise funds. So that was great fun. Terrible weather. It was pouring rain. But even so, we raised about £10,000 and create some amazing images. And again, that desire to do weird and wacky fundraising activities. So that was 2008. And I think the next, obviously, big iconic moment in Aerobility's history was becoming Aerobility. So again, in 2008, the British Disabled Flying Association was proving to be descriptive, but holding us back in that it's hard to say. It feels almost like an association rather than a charity. So the word Aerobility was dreamt up. The branding that came with it. We had some great support from some volunteers that helped us put that branding together. But I'm really pleased with the Aerobility look, feel, and branding, which I think very much describes what we do even now. So that's still standing us in good stead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, and I think that rebrand again. Your vision there, Mike, was just about the right time, and of course that gave the charity an opportunity to to go out and publicise its services once again. And soon after, there was of course a magical year for the charity, which was 2012. A lot happened in that year, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Aerobility is all about teamwork and doing things together, and I think 2012 was a great year that demonstrated that. Two key events in 2012 were, of course, the Olympic Games and then the Paralympic Games, in which we're very much part, and I'll come back to that in a second. But also our second world record, which was the Global Flight Sim Challenge, where we flew a flight simulator around the world in real time and had 100 celebrity pilots, including astronaut Buzz Aldrin and Chris Evans, and lots of famous faces from the flying world, helping us set this Guinness World Record and raising an amazing £100,000, which for one project was simply stunning. But yeah, for me, still a highlight for the charity is the Paralympic flypast we did. So that's where a airplane with LEDs and fireworks burning on the wingtips flew over the Paralympic opening ceremony to kick off the Paralympic Games. That was an amazing moment, and I think I went very grey during that project, as we didn't have permission to do it until pretty much the day before. We had to certify the world's first nighttime air display over a capital city with a disabled pilot at the helm. So it was quite an interesting safety case, but we worked hard to show the CAA and the EASA that the airplane was safe, the pilot was safe, and the profile of the flight over the opening ceremony was also safe. So it was, again, very much a team effort working with some amazing people. That's just amazing image. The colours from those LED lights was just stunning.
I do.
So, big thanks to Tetnam, Tim Orchard, fantastic supporter and a great friend. Gamma Aviation, so many people, again, from the Gladiator Movement, donated their time and support. The technical calculations, Guy Westgate, Tim Jews all helped so much to do the technical side, the operational side, and the safety side. Tim helped us with the airplane.
Now, bringing us straight up to date, give us some insights into one or two other projects that you've dreamt up and that you've led. I can feed you many, but I'll let you come up with the ones that are your favourites.
Well, I think more recently the the second or third world record attempt, which was successful, I'm pleased to say, which was taking back our the world record for pulling the heaviest airplane with wheelchairs. So back in 2018, with the great support of Heathrow Airport and British Airways, we retook our record to pull a Boeing 787 Dreamliner with wheelchairs over 100 meters. So yeah, we smashed the record. Hopefully, we'll keep it a bit longer this time. So that was another amazing moment. Yeah. But I think the highlights we see at Aerobility are on a daily basis. I often talk about seeing that airplane door open with a smiling face makes it worthwhile while we do it every day. Those air smiles, or whatever you want to call it, where that the sky gives people. It's just great to be part of that. And those daily wins make it all worthwhile.
Yeah, and I'd like to get into the mind of the person that leads this amazing charity, Mike. And it's a very simple question. But what does Aerobility mean to you?
Well, I think flying is a bit like a drug. I think people that introduce flying to other people are always called almost like drug dealers. But I think it's a simple proposition. I think once you've experienced flight, you want to share it with others. It's such a damn cool thing to do. It's such an amazing thing to do that with so many benefits, mentally, physically, just something that challenges you, pushes you. It makes you feel alive. And not everybody gets the chance to do that. So I think that proposition, get somebody in an airplane to do it safely, to give them the opportunity to do it, is what it makes it all worthwhile. And I think the feedback we get, the fact that people are coming back for more, and we know there's demand for more of it around the country, and hopefully some projects that we're working on at the moment will allow us to do that in years to come, to make it more available to more disabled people around the UK. It's something we should really be pushing for.
Yeah. And, it's been, almost 20 years now since you've been involved. Let us into some of the thoughts you've got for the next 20 years.
I think, like many organisations, we've got to survive. The next year or two is going to be really tough. I think for all organisations, from a small charity like us to a big company, it's going to be challenging. So we've got to make sure we are very careful with our expenditure. Any projects that we take part in, we've got to be as robust as possible. We've got to keep making sure that ultimately we don't lose sight of what's important, which is making flying accessible to people with disabilities. So to try and do that as cost effectively as possible, making it as accessible as possible to everybody, wherever they are in the UK, whatever their disability type, to remove those barriers. That's what we've got to focus on. And I think, we can't do that without partnering with other organisations, with other flying organisations, without working with the industry that already supports us so well. But we can do so much more. So, it's about moving things in that direction, continuing to be professional, representing the flying community and the disabled community as best we can.
And, there's a wonderful team, wonderful loyal team that you've got at Blackbush at Aerobility headquarters. There's the team of trustees, of course, and then an army of volunteers. What does that wider team, Mike, of people mean to you?
Oh, absolutely couldn't do it without them. It's not about any one individual. It's about the team pulling together. And every day we see examples of amazing volunteering, of amazing team members. And I love that there's a movement on different days between somebody that's a volunteer one day, a disabled flyer the next day, perhaps a staff member in the future. Harvey Mathieson is a great example of a flyer that's become a volunteer, is now a part-time staff member because of, I think, hopefully his enjoyment of being part of the team and also wanting to pass that on and getting other people flying in the future. It's a great thing to be part of. When somebody that benefits from the charity becomes part of delivery moving forwards.
And, I've had the conversations with some of the guys, and I know that Aerobility is their universe. I mean, it's their social hub. It's what feeds their their hobby, and for some it's their career. I mean, is this where you thought this organization would be when you first had that vision, Mike? Or where does it sit if you could wind the clock back?
I guess you could only hope that it could have been successful as it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's been really tough in the past. We've had some real struggles to get through. We've had some financial challenges. We've had operational challenges. Trouble with airplanes is occasionally they give you nasty surprises. An engine might have a problem and suddenly you've got a £20,000 bill to get an airplane flying again. So those kinds of bumps in the road, you've got to build the robustness in the organisation to try and deal with it. Coronavirus is a good example of something we couldn't have predicted, but thankfully those around us and the great trustees we have and the management of the charity realised that we need a rainy day fund. So we'd put a little bit of money aside for just that thing, and that's really what saved us over the last few months, having a bit of a reserve, bit of a rainy day fund. But that's gone now, so that's why we're working hard to fill the coffers back up again.
Yeah, and I know that the trustees, the staff, and all the volunteers, Mike, they wouldn't have that passion and motivation for what they do if it wasn't for you. I really do see a lot of people looking up to you and thoroughly enjoy being led by you. And I think that's just a testament, Mike, to the person that you are. I think Aerobility, frankly, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. And I know that I hope I speak on behalf of many people to say just two simple words, which is thank you. And I'm very excited to see the journey this charity is going to take in the future. I think they've run out of gongs and awards to give you. So I can't believe it's 7 years since the MBE already, and you're still, pushing that pioneering spirit, Mike. So, as I say, on behalf of everybody at the charity, a huge thank you. So it's now question time. There's a few questions I've seen popping up, and there's a really good one here. In terms of when you learned to fly, what were your standout memories?
I think I was lucky to have some great mentors. I think all of us that progress in aviation, we're lucky to have those people early in our career that we can look up to and motivate us and put us on the right path to be safe aviators and good rounded individuals as well. So I think just some of the people that flying brings you into contact with, the community it gives you, that, contacts I made when I was 15 years old are now still involved with the charity or helping with Project Able, for example, which is, our project to get some ex-RAF Air Cadet motor gliders flying for the benefit of the charity and society. None of those things would be possible without building those lifelong friendships and relationships. So I think that's one of the things that is really enjoyable for me, is just that treat everybody with respect, and those that learn from other people, learn the best of other people, and actually, if you can apply that the best you can, then that will benefit not just us as individuals, but the groups or the community groups that we're involved with, like Aerobility.
Yeah. There's another question I've got here. It says, what's your most memorable pinch yourself Aerobility moment?
I think probably just getting a phone call from somebody like Buzz Aldrin, or a Skype call, just chewing the fat, just talking about what it's like to walk on the moon, something like that. That was a definite pinchy moment. I think, John, yours was similar, perhaps when you flew with Buzz. In the Aerobility Yak, there must be a pinchy moment in your Aerobility career. But I think Aerobility does give us those crazy moments, a bit like the Armchair Air Show when we were having a live chat with the commander of the space shuttle. Things like that you just wouldn't otherwise do. Aerobility isn't always about fun and games. It's really hard work at times. It's not without its challenges. But those ultimately are some of the rewards personally. But again, going back to seeing the smiles on faces and giving everyone the chance to fly, just seeing that benefit is what really, really motivates us, I think.
Yeah, no, here. And this is an interesting one. It says, what's your approach to life? I think Aerobility probably is your life. So if we just take Aerobility out of the equation.
Well, I think those that know me know I'm a relatively laid back individual, so I tend to have a one pace. But I think, just take. I think disability does teach you resilience, and I think some disabled people do ultimately struggle. And I think hopefully what I can demonstrate is, despite physical challenges and things like wearing this breathing machine or what have you, I know it looks a bit odd to start with, but effectively people start to hopefully look past the disability. And I think by being in a role in a charity which is interfacing with other disabled people, personally, I hope that I can show people with disabilities, maybe not as obvious or even more obvious than mine, that they can drive, they can fly, they can work, they can, live a relatively normal life within the constraints that we have. We've all got challenges to face, but sometimes it's a bit more physical or a bit more mental or whatever. But I think, just get out and do it.
Yeah, and on that note, who inspires? You talked about the inspirational character that started your journey with Aerobility, Mike. But who inspires you today? It could be an individual, or it could be a group of individuals. What keeps you going?
I think it's you guys. I think it's the Aerobility team. I think the diverse group of people, the people that want to be part of Aerobility, and whether it's a staff member or a volunteer or a disabled flyer or just somebody that makes a £1 donation, all makes a difference. And I think just that collective sheer will and passion to support the organisation and help people to fly is what really inspires me. Absolutely. And it's my privilege to be part of that.
That's lovely. Yeah. Well, this is the last question, and it's quite apt. What's your idea of aviation paradise?
I don't think you can have regrets in life, but one of my frustrations about being disabled is I never got the chance to fly a Spitfire. And I think every aviator has got that latent desire to sit in and start up a Merlin and fly a Spitfire. I suppose P-51 is the second best, but being a Brit, it's got to be a Spitfire. So I'd love to have done that. I think if I wasn't disabled and I was still able to fly formation and aerobatics, I would have flown one eventually. But that's what ifs, isn't it? I think that's. I think we've all got those things we'd like to have done, but life gets in the way sometimes.
Just, absolutely. Well, Mike, that brings us to an end, and it's been a real treat for me. You're a very good friend of mine. We've been on this Aerobility journey for a long time, and it's just lovely to hear some thoughts and perspectives that I never knew you had. It's lovely to see that you're still very much motivated and thoroughly enjoy the environment that you've created. So I'd just like to say thank you to you, Mike, and to everybody listening and watching. Remember, you can still donate, so you can go on to our page there that Chad's going to pop up at the bottom there in Just Giving. Remember that every £1 that you do give to this charity is going to allow us to continue this life-changing work that you've heard Mike talk about. So, Mike, I just want to say a last thank you. And is the office open at Aerobility? What's the current situation?
Yeah, so we've had a cautious return to flight. So we've initially been flying with people with PPLs that needed checkout, so we can get people flying solo again. So we'll be doing that. And we have recently sent out a questionnaire just to find out how much interest there is from people with the need to do instructional flying and whether trial flights and things are possible. So yeah, we've started flying with some of our young people. For example, the Junior Aspiring Pilot Program. We've just started flying with some of those young people on a one-to-one basis. So yeah, we're cautiously opening the doors. I think it's probably quite a good time to do that when everybody's outside and coronavirus levels are relatively low in the community, because perhaps next winter, who knows what will happen. So yeah, we're doing a little bit safely, and we will do a little bit more if we can. But obviously, we're paying very close attention to the current situation and the current guidelines. But the office is effectively appointments only. So if you're going to fly, then you'll book in to go to the office. The door is locked. There's nowhere to go there currently. We are very much controlling access. to keep the team safe and to keep anybody that's flying safe.
Well, you've heard it there, and lots of you will be watching this back on YouTube, maybe in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. So we'll be looking back at this moment in our lives with the novelty that has been the last few months. But I'm going to close now, Mike, to say thank you for the last time, and it's been a real treat to talk to you today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Likewise, thanks for your time, and thank you for all you do for the charity. You've been a great supporter and a great friend and a long-term trustee of the charity. So again, a great example of a team effort working together to ultimately get people flying, which is what it's all about. Keep it simple.
Absolutely. Thanks all. Bye-bye.